I am George Cadbury, and it was my privilege to build this school, to provide the money and the means for the school to be built a matter of 8 years ago in 1910. I want you to remember what happened, and using this newfangled machinery they have, which will record moving pictures, I want you to make a record of what happened during that terrible time, so that others can see that all the people of Bournville, and indeed the people of Birmingham, by coming together and by working together, we all did our bit.
Bournville Infant School have come to the Library of Birmingham to do some work around what happened to Bournville in the First World War, and this is part of a bigger project. So they've had some funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund. I actually work for the First World War Engagement Centre, which is led by the University of Birmingham. The centre's called Voices of War and Peace, and so we've helped support this project.
We wanted to look into how the war had been for the Cadbury factory and the family, and how it would have affected families in Bournville as well. We visited the exhibition over at Cadbury World as well, which allowed them to learn about some of the Cadbury history, but also the visit to Birmingham Library and their World War I exhibition, where they could see things that were relating to Cadbury, the Cadbury family in the factory, as well as Birmingham as a wider community. And the activities that they took part in there, again, allowed them to delve deeper into the lives of the families in Birmingham. And it, again, got them taking part in things and finding out things for themselves, which is really important.
I learned that people from different countries came to our country without their mums and dads to be safe here.
It was nice for them to go into the library, see photos particularly from Bournville as well, and little snippets of information, and seeing artefacts in the gallery, and really having an expert's point of view, because we can tell them things, but it's only what we found out ourselves, and obviously these are things in the archives that we won't be able to get hold of. So it was another experience for them to be able to understand what went on.
We've got 4 activities for the children. It's all based around stories about Bournville in the First World War. So we've got some photographs of some men who have just enlisted, and also some women who are knitting and providing comforts for the troops. So we've asked the children to think about what the people would be thinking and what they might be saying as that happens. The photograph we have here is part of the Cadbury archive, which is kept in the City Archive collection, and it shows a group of men. They're in normal dress, but they're all new recruits. They've just enlisted to join the army. These men are Bournville men, so we're not entirely sure if they're all from Bournville or if they all worked at Cadbury's, but probably the majority of them did. And again, this is really an important photograph for the school, thinking about its history. The second photograph that we're looking at here is called Comforts for Soldiers, and it shows a group of Bournville women who were gathered together to sew and knit things like socks and scarves and mittens that would then be sent to soldiers who were fighting abroad. And the photograph actually comes from the Bournville Works magazine, which was produced for the workers, and during the war it contains lots of information about the soldiers and their experience, and also what was happening in Bournville to help support the war effort.
We sent a letter home asking them to sort of look into their own family histories.
That letter was asking parents, what stories have you got? Can you bring those into school? I'm speaking to a lot of the parents. Sometimes it's information they didn't realise about their family that they found out because of this.
I work for the Playhouse, and we've been working here at Bournville Infants over the first half of this week, working with the children to make drama based around the objects and the artefacts that they've brought from home. Hopefully deepening the stories that they've discovered about their own families and what happened in Bournville during the First World War, and bringing them to life, and using drama so the children have a sort of more empathetic understanding of the situation during the First World War.
Yes.
Why didn't your family behave in the war?
Well, that's a very good question. My religion is the real answer. I am a Quaker, a member of the Society of Friends, and I was always brought up to believe that you should solve problems by talking to each other.
Having someone like George Cadbury turn up to set the project gives it a status, gives it a value, but it also gives them an opportunity to talk to him and find out information.
I think it's really important that they use their imagination.
It gives them a platform to be free and creative and explore things in brand new and exciting ways. So I'm a big advocate for exploring things dramatically.
It's a letter telling me that I've got to go and join the army.
You have to because it's the law, and if you don't like it, you can just try and be brave.
4 hours it took to unload that train of wounded soldiers. I don't want to end up like that. The in-role work, it's a leap for the children. It places them in the present, although it's a fictional present of the drama, and it allows them to talk to real, in inverted commas, people.
I think Malcolm was beginning to try and get the children to imagine what it would be like and step back in time as if they were a soldier in the war, they were in the trenches. So he was taking their knowledge of what they knew, that it was cold, they'd be tired, so what they'd picked up in their research about life in the trenches in general. But then he was trying to get out, while acting that out, how they would be feeling if they were the soldier, what they'd feel and what they'd do.
I want you to imagine that you're a soldier. Close your eyes. You're a soldier in the trenches.
That's really important, that safe imagination, exploration area through drama.
In the medium that we're doing it through, so with the drama and all the acting and them getting into the freeze frames and acting it out for themselves, really helps them to understand.
I hope the war ends soon so that I can see you again. One of the things that a drama company brings to a project like this is sort of bringing it to life, as it were. And we can't do the oral history anymore. Those people aren't with us anymore, so everything else is kind of second-hand, third-hand. But those stories are still really interesting, and we can put flesh on the bones of those stories by using our imaginations and exploring around them with drama and speculating about what it must have been like.
I started the week by teaching them all a wartime song, and we learnt Pack Up Your Troubles and It's a Long Way to Tipperary. We then changed the words and made it all to do with Bournville, so I got the children writing morale-boosting songs to the tune of the traditional songs.
My late husband's grandmother was Dame Elizabeth Cadbury, and she was a very important lady in this area, and in the country for that matter. 25 Serbian children, mostly peasant children, managed to escape to this country. They were helped along the way, I think, but often they were at the point of starvation, and they came to Birmingham. And she was very involved with that. She formed a small committee, and they were looked after. She found a house for them to live in, and she sent them to Bournville Infant and Junior School.
When the war started, loads of Belgians escaped and came over to Britain, and quite a lot of them came to Birmingham. And the Cadburys, because of their Quaker background, looked after quite a lot of these refugees.
So they were conscientious objectors, but I think they felt that they really wanted to help with the war because it was so important. And they helped in very many ways.
This photograph actually shows George and Elizabeth Cadbury with girls who had come from Austria, and this is actually from 1921. So after the war had ended, Austria was in a lot of trouble. Basically, there was famine, a lot of poverty. So a lot of refugees came over to Britain again, and lots came to Birmingham. And in sort of typical Cadbury fashion, they looked after these refugees. So these are a group of girls that lived in Birmingham.
Lawrence Cadbury was Dame Elizabeth's eldest son, and he decided that he wanted to help in the war. And in 1914, he built up the Friends Ambulance Unit and went to France with them. And they helped a lot of people, he in Flanders in particular, but all during the war. And they brought wounded back to England. The other family member involved in the First World War was Sir Egbert Cadbury. We knew him as Uncle Bertie. He was in the Royal Naval Air Service in 1915 as a sub-lieutenant. And one of his great feats was that there were 10 Zeppelins came over to this country, flew over on one occasion, and there were only 3 left at the end. And the story goes that he was at a dinner party and he came out in his dinner jacket and got into the Zeppelin. I'm not quite sure that's absolutely true, but he certainly got into his aircraft to shoot down the Zeppelin, and they were flying at about 8,000 feet, and they shot the last one down, which was tremendous. And then he also shot another one down a bit later on, and that one was the last one that ever came over the British Channel, the English Channel to England. And he was awarded the DFC and the DSO for his bravery on these missions.
I make no secret of the fact that I would not have fought in the war, because I do not believe in fighting to solve problems.
Lots of the children said that actually if we'd only all been like George Cadbury and not fought and helped people, then that so many soldiers wouldn't have lost their lives. And I think as teachers, that's what we're trying to do, to get children to work together, you know, for society to get on. So I think they've picked up a lot of important messages from listening to George Cadbury.
A particular photograph that we saw of men, newly enlisted men, going off to fight has inspired a little drama of, you know, what would that be like if they go home and tell their families that they've joined up. Children are coming up with very complex responses, so they're often talking about the idea that perhaps not all the men would have wanted to go and fight. People could say, actually, I don't want to fight. There was space to say that. There was a man on Oak Tree Lane who supported conscientious objectors, so he helped them with their tribunals, he'd given them information about what to say at the tribunals to establish themselves as legitimate conscientious objectors, opposed to fighting.
And for the children to learn about that as well really helps them to understand that war, you know, isn't all about fighting, but it was about helping each other in the community. And again, that links back to our school being a community within itself and in the heart of the wider community of Bournville.
The objects had been brought in by members of the class. We had a piece of shrapnel that was very exciting, quite large.
I'm going to take this round, you're going to hold your hands out, I'm going to put it in your hand, you're going to feel it and give it me back.
I brought in this piece of shrapnel from my great-granddad's cheek.
Parent yesterday who brought in a piece of shrapnel that was found in a great-great-grandparent's cheek.
It went into somebody's face and it got stuck.
And then for the children to pass around that shrapnel, they're really, really engrossed in it.
We looked at artefacts, we looked at printouts of information, old photographs, and talked about those stories, talked about how they related to World War I, and started to devise drama around that.
The class that I've been working with have brought several interesting things. A fantastic photograph of a great-great-grandfather leaving the front line with his arm in a sling, escorted by a member of the Salvation Army. What's particularly interesting, I think anyway, is the fact that his trousers stop just below the knee, and apparently, so the story goes, they were blown off by the blast of the explosion he was caught in. The material was torn away at the knee. He's walking, so presumably he's fairly mobile. And that led us to an improvisation exploring that moment where soldiers leave their trenches during a lull in the fighting to go and reclaim their wounded friends, gather them from the battlefields and ultimately bring them home.
This is a poster of my grandfather trying to blow up a bridge, and then he got a bravery award for blowing up that bridge from the Queen.
And this is on a front page newspaper, and it's in, I think it was a museum in Scotland. So those sorts of things that they didn't know about, you know, they're really pleased that they were able to find out about.
One of the things that came up, which wasn't an object, but it was a story a child brought in, was her great-great-great-grandmother had worked in the ammunition factory, and they'd all suffered with this business of the discoloration in their hands, and she had had that happen to her. So she'd become poisoned by the stuff that she'd been working with. So that was really relevant to them.
The chocolates in Bournville were sent to the soldiers in World War I. At Christmas in 1914, they all got on and they had chocolates inside. They must have tasted really nice. So I think this belonged to my grandpa Jim. He really injured himself, but he still came back home safely.
There were these girls called Cadbury Angels who knitted hats and scarves to send to the soldiers. We also found out when we visited the Cadbury exhibition that they also sent books for the soldiers to read, and they carefully selected things like Charles Dickens and stuff that the soldiers would like.
There's also another parent who has sent in lots of letters that were sent home from a husband to a wife, years and years worth of letters.
These are lots of letters from World War I, and they're nearly 100 years old.
It's the story of the letters from Joey's great-grandfather, Harry, to his then sweetheart, Lizzie, who lived in Birmingham during World War I. He wrote over the course of several years. Haven't looked through all the letters. So while he was writing, she was keeping all these letters. She kept them down through the years, and they were passed on to their daughter, Joey's grandmother, Josephine. And it's a box about this big and about that thick, but it's just chock full of these letters, still very legible, not faded, from different places where he was posted in the UK and also in France from the trenches. And a lot of the letters are just about mundane day-to-day things, you know, how the training's going and how there's never enough time to write, and my dear Lizzie. I've been starting a project of typing up the letters and transcribing them in a hopes that then it's a collection of the letters that tell a story of what was happening at that time.
This is my great-great-grandfather, and he was a pilot during the war.
His name was Edwin Leslie Bishop, and he was a pilot in the First World War. He was a reconnaissance photographer, and he won a medal for bravery.
Another scene we worked on was inspired by an image that had been brought in by one of the children. It's a fantastic image of a gentleman in uniform.
This is a picture of my great-granddad. He lived in Australia and fought in the First World War.
And the story goes that her great-granddad, George, was from Australia, fought in World War I, was injured and so sent to Selly Park to recuperate. And whilst in Selly Park, he met Alice, who was Tia's great-grandma. And I just think it's such a beautiful story of these two people destined never to meet, and then they meet in Selly Park, and it's such a lovely story centred around the area.
Let's have a look. We recently found out that Connie and Ellie's great-great-great-uncle fought in World War I.
Great-great-great-uncle fought in World War I. He signed up to fight for the British Army, but is then believed to have joined in the Canadian forces, potentially with a view of settling in Canada at the end of the war. And that's what my father said to me. He says, it could have been completely different. Had he lived, grandmother would have gone and I would have gone and we would have been Canadian.
Maybe that's something you could ask your granddad. Ask him how he found this out and where he looked. Maybe he could show you.
We've got logbooks dating back to when the school was opened, and during the period 1914 to 1918 there are quite a few references from the head teacher about the school having to be closed because it was too cold, so that the children were sent home, particularly during the winter months. And reading some of those has been fascinating. You know, there's entries to say that all of the children entertained the injured soldiers. So they stopped working from 9:30 to 11:30 and all those soldiers came here and all the children sang songs and did all of those sorts of things. So reading that was really fascinating.
In the logbook it says that on the 11th of November 1918, the children of Bournville Infants made flags to commemorate the end of the war, to celebrate the end of the war. So our scene is all about that. It's children making the flags and children celebrating that moment.
Today is the 20th of November 1918, and it is a special day. It's a happy day, because only a matter of days ago we came to the end of this terrible, terrible war.
On display here today we've got some archive material from the City collection, but also lots of archive material that actually belongs to some of the pupils, and I think this is fantastic to see so much material here together. There's some school logbooks that belong to the school, so they're extremely interesting, that talk about what was happening in day-to-day life during the conflict. There's some fantastic collections of medals that children have brought in, and also some lovely letters that one of the children's grandfather wrote during the war. So I think it's fantastic that we have the City collection, which has a huge amount of material about Birmingham in the First World War, but to see it alongside the children's own personal collections, I think really enhances it, and it brings it much more to life, I think, for the young people that have been working on the project.
I'm here in the infant school, Bournville Infant School today, to see the exhibition of the World War I that they've put on, and I'm very impressed by it. I think the involvement of the school and the people in Bournville, and particularly I think the parents who produced some most amazing memorabilia and memories of great-grandfathers and so on. But I think that's particularly interesting, as well as the Cadbury family, but mostly I think it's come from the families that are still living in Bournville.
My daughter Molly's in year 2 at Bournville Infants, and the school that's asked for anything that we had in the family that might be relevant to World War I.
These are my 2 great-grandfathers, George and Bill.
And we had some photographs here of my 2 grandfathers. This is George Clark, who joined up in World War I, and we had a photograph of him in his World War I uniform. And this is his discharge certificate, so he survived the war.
It's the centenary of World War I, and it's important that children understand about what's happened in the past, and this brings it alive to them, particularly in this year where everybody's talking about it and there's a lot going on.
Oh, yes, Joey's reminding me that the letters are nearly 100 years old, and there may be some that are actually 100 years old if we dug down to the bottom of the box. It was very exciting to have the opportunity to bring the box into the school, to be displayed at this exhibition of World War I memorabilia and artifacts, things from the past that are still very much a part of the children's identities.
How could officers send men over the top knowing that a machine gun was waiting for them? I can't believe it.
Looking around today at the exhibition, I'm really pleased to see that people have brought in family mementos. With any family history research, that can be a really key thing to do. I always say, go through drawers, look in lofts, find anything that you can that has names, dates, any information, because that's a great starting point. The starting point isn't online or even in the archives of the library. It is at home. Talking to any members of the family that still have any oral history, so your grandparents or great-grandparents may have heard stories that have been passed down. Put all that together first, pull out the key information of names, anything to do with service numbers, units where people served, where they served, anything you can.
There's only so much I could find online, and not being a genealogist, I didn't know exactly what to look for, so I was interested in finding a bit more, and she gave me some tips of where to look for information.
I've done a fair bit of research for a number of people, including trying to find some of my own ancestors and what they were doing. Captain Thomas Frederick Le Mesurier, he started off in naval services, but soon joined the fledgling ranks of flyers, so he learned to fly in an old-fashioned airplane. And we can find all sorts of records online and in other places. He sadly didn't survive the war, so like many people, he's commemorated in a Commonwealth war grave, and they're easily accessible online to search. And I found a photo, because I didn't have a photo, with his card which said how he learned to fly and where he learned to fly.
There's a bakery over in the village square, in Bournville Village Square, and it's been there since 1909 and it's still there today. And in researching this project, I actually discovered that my great-uncle Will, his family owned that bakery, and I had no idea. I'm not even from round here. So to make that discovery in the researching of this project was wonderful, and it made me really feel like I was part of this place, and the heritage that we're exploring, I was part of it as well. And it was just such a wonderful discovery to make, and made me want to learn more about the area.
We really believe in the value of drama as a way for children to learn. But something like this, where they can really immerse themselves in the whole thing, they're seeing objects, they're reading letters, they're looking at artefacts. But also actually taking part in something like this, it really helps the children have a feel of what it must have actually been like. For 100 years ago is quite a long time ago, but for a small child in an infant school, it may as well be 1,000,000 years ago. They've got no way of grasping that sense of time. And so for them to actually understand that some of this happened in their school and that this is what it was like in the building where they learn every day is a fantastic experience for them.
I think when we have so much media and we have sort of things on film, it doesn't seem real to them. It's a step removed. Whereas if they're actually physically thinking about it, acting it, expressing it, it makes it much more real to them.
Children's often answer nowadays is, how do you find out about the past? You go on the internet. So it's been really good for them to find out that actually there are other ways of finding the answers to things.
My father, he was 93 when he died, and he's told me stories of when he lived in Selly Oak, and he the first Zeppelin come over. Can you imagine it? A Zeppelin, he said, I could see the pilot, and he said, we rushed into Healy Road, I think it was, under the table. And this is can't imagine it, can you? Zeppelins coming over to bomb Birmingham. I just couldn't believe it. There's lots of other things as well. I wished I'd have asked him more when he was alive.
History happened to real people. It's not just about dusty textbooks or glass museum cases.
For her, it's obviously just understanding her history and her family and their involvement in history, and the fact that it is not just, I suppose, as a subject, something that affects other people, that we're all part of it all the time.
All these artefacts are kind of lying around in people's lofts, and it's these fairly young children going home and saying, what do we know about this? And suddenly all these riches are pouring out and conversations are happening, and I would contend the telling of these stories an act of remembrance in its own right, really.
When we got the letter home from Joey about looking for World War I artefacts and family treasures, we thought, oh yes, we've got that box. So we got it out and dusted it off and started having a look inside.
Remember that any of those artefacts and letters that you've got, it's important to conserve them.
What's really nice is trying to pull things out that are personal to our family. And certainly meant a lot to my mother and aunt that we'd done this, and then we were able to talk with Molly about it, and it made it much more personal.
I think it will really stick in their minds. I think it will be something that they'll look back at for their school life as well, and it's that they've taken part in, and it's not just about the teachers sitting there and imparting knowledge about World War I. They've actually thought about it in terms of their own families and their own lives and the lives of the people in their surroundings and their community, and I think that's been a really important part of what we're doing in this week and over the few weeks that we've been working on it. They're really able to relate to people in their own family, people in their community, not just this happened to somebody else. It's about it being happening to people in their lives, in their families.
I would encourage anybody to look into their heritage and their family history, because you're going to find out things that you never knew existed, and you're going to discover that you're part of a place, your history is part of a place that you didn't think it was part of, and it just links you to so much more of the world and links you to so much more of history, and it really gives you an idea of where you came from and where you are today and even where you could go, and it's such a wonderful thing to find out you're part of a place that you didn't know you were part of.
Now is a time for us to think about peace and making sure that there is never another of these terrible wars.